Chapter 6. Inspired Instruction. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Daniel 1:17. God speaks, or is willing to speak to men today just as he did anciently. If men were more diligent in their search to know the will of their Father, they would become better acquainted with the many means of communication he has provided for them. Dreams are one of the more common types of divine revelation. They are intended to teach us in every principle and theory pertaining to life and salvation. Wilford Woodruff explained, What I wanted to say in regard to these matters is that the Lord does communicate some things of importance to the children of men by means of visions and dreams, as well as by the records of divine truth. And what is it all for? It is to teach us a principle. We may never see anything take place exactly as we see it in a dream or a vision, yet it is intended to teach us a principle. Wilford Woodruff, J.D. 22-333. Lucy Mack Smith, mother of the prophet, was troubled about which religion she should join. She prayed that her husband would find the right gospel, and that his heart would be softened to receive it when it came. She said that she retired for the night and soon fell asleep, and had the following dream. The 2 tall trees. I thought that I stood in a large and beautiful meadow, which lay a short distance from the house in which we lived, and that everything around me wore an aspect of peculiar pleasantness. The first thing that attracted my special attention in this magnificent meadow was a very pure and clear stream of water, which ran through the midst of it, and as I traced this stream, I discovered 2 trees standing upon its margin, both of which were on the same side of the stream. These trees were very beautiful. They were well proportioned, and towered with majestic beauty to a great height. Their branches, which added to their symmetry and glory, commenced near the top, and spread themselves in luxurious grandeur around. I gazed upon them with wonder and admiration, and after beholding them a short time, I saw one of them was surrounded with a bright belt that shone like burnished gold, but far more brilliantly. Presently a gentle breeze passed by, and the tree encircled with this golden zone bent gracefully before the wind, and waved its beautiful branches in the light air. As the wind increased, this tree assumed the most lively and animated appearance, and seemed to express in its motions the utmost joy and happiness. If it had been an intelligent creature, it could not have conveyed, by the power of language, the idea of joy and gratitude so perfectly as it did, and even the stream that rolled beneath it shared, apparently, every sensation felt by the tree, for, as the branches danced over the stream, it would swell gently, then recede again with a motion as soft as the breathing of an infant, but as lively as the dancing of a sunbeam. The belt also partook of the same influence, and, as it moved in unison with the motion of the stream and of the tree, it increased continually in refulgence and magnitude, until it became exceedingly glorious. I turned my eyes upon its fellow, which stood opposite, but it was not surrounded with the belt of light as the former, and it stood erect and fixed as a pillar of marble. No matter how strong the wind blew over it, not a leaf was stirred, not a bough was bent, but obstinately stiff it stood, scorning alike the zephyr's breath, or the power of the mighty storm. I wondered at what I saw, and said in my heart, what can be the meaning of all this? And the interpretation given me was that these personated my husband, and his oldest brother Jesse Smith, that the stubborn and unyielding tree was like Jesse, that the other, more pliant and flexible, was like Joseph, my husband, that the breath of heaven, which passed over them, was the pure and undefiled gospel of the Son of God, which gospel Jesse would always resist, but which Joseph, when he was more advanced in life, would hear and receive with his whole heart, and rejoice therein, and unto him would be added intelligence, happiness, glory, and everlasting life. History of Joseph Smith, by Lucy Smith, page 44. Lucy's husband, Joseph, then had a dream which instructed him that there was no true church upon the earth at that time. He had prayed about the situation of the so-called Christian religions of that day, and one morning he related this dream. The gloomy desert. I seemed to be traveling in an open, barren field, and as I was traveling, I turned my eyes towards the east, the west, the north, and the south, but could see nothing save dead, fallen timber. Not a vestige of life, either animal or vegetable, could be seen. Besides, to render the scene still more dreary, the most death-like silence prevailed. No sound of anything animate could be heard in all the field. I was alone in this gloomy desert, with the exception of an attendant spirit, who kept constantly by my side. Of him I inquired the meaning of what I saw, and why I was thus traveling in such a dismal place. He answered thus, "This field is the world, which now lieth inanimate and dumb, in regard to the true religion, or plan of salvation. But travel on, and by the wayside you will find on a certain log a box, the contents of which, if you eat thereof, will make you wise, and give unto you wisdom and understanding. I carefully observed what was told me by my guide, and proceeding a short distance, I came to the box. I immediately took it up and placed it under my left arm, then with eagerness I raised the lid, and began to taste of its contents, upon which all manner of beasts, horned cattle, and roaring animals, rose up on every side in the most threatening manner possible, tearing the earth, tossing their horns, and bellowing most terrifically all around me, and they finally came so close upon me that I was compelled to drop the box and fly for my life. Yet, in the midst of all this I was perfectly happy, though I awoke trembling. From this forward, continues Lucy Mack Smith, my husband seemed more confirmed than ever in the opinion that there was no order or class of religionists that knew any more concerning the kingdom of God than those of the world, or such as made no profession of religion whatever. History of Joseph Smith, by Lucy Smith, page 47. Lucy Smith wrote about another dream which her husband received in Vermont in 1811, instructing him on the true gospel. The most delicious fruit. I thought, said he, I was traveling in an open, desolate field, which appeared to be very barren. As I was thus traveling, the thought suddenly came into my mind that I had better stop and reflect upon what I was doing before I went any farther. So I asked myself, "What motive can I have in traveling here, and what place can this be?" My guide, who was by my side, as before, said, "This is the desolate world, but travel on." The road was so broad and barren that I wondered why I should travel in it, for, said I to myself, "Broad is the road, and wide is the gate that leads to death, and many there be that walk therein. But narrow is the way, and strait is the gate that leads to everlasting life, and few there be that go in thereat." Traveling a short distance further, I came to a narrow path. This path I entered, and, when I had traveled a little way in it, I beheld a beautiful stream of water, which ran from the east to the west. Of this stream, I could see neither the source nor yet the mouth, but as far as my eyes could extend, I could see a rope running along the bank of it, about as high as a man could reach, and beyond me was a low, but very pleasant valley, in which stood a tree, such as I had never seen before. It was exceedingly handsome, insomuch that I looked upon it with wonder and admiration. Its beautiful branches spread themselves somewhat like an umbrella, and it bore a kind of fruit, in shape much like a chestnut burr, and as white as snow, or, if possible, whiter. I gazed upon the same with considerable interest, and as I was doing so, the burrs or shells commenced opening and shedding their particles, or the fruit which they contained, which was of dazzling whiteness. I drew near and began to eat of it, and I found it delicious beyond description. As I was eating, I said in my heart, "I cannot eat this alone, I must bring my wife and children, that they may partake with me." Accordingly, I went and brought my family, which consisted of a wife and 7 children, and we all commenced eating and praising God for this blessing. We were exceedingly happy, insomuch that our joy could not easily be expressed. While thus engaged, I beheld a spacious building standing opposite the valley which we were in, and it appeared to reach to the very heavens. It was full of doors and windows, and they were all filled with people, who were very finely dressed. When these people observed us in the low valley under the tree, they pointed the finger of scorn at us, and treated us with all manner of disrespect and contempt. But their contumely we utterly disregarded. I presently turned to my guide and inquired of him the meaning of the fruit that was so delicious. He told me it was the pure love of God, shed abroad in the hearts of all those who love him and keep his commandments. He then commanded me to go and bring the rest of my children. I told him that we were all there. "No," he replied, "Look, yonder, you have 2 more, and you must bring them also." Upon raising my eyes, I saw 2 small children standing some distance off. I immediately went to them, and brought them to the tree, upon which they commenced eating with the rest, and we all rejoiced together. The more we ate, the more we seemed to desire, until we even got down upon our knees and scooped it up, eating it by double handfuls. After feasting in this manner a short time, I asked my guide what was the meaning of the spacious building which I saw. He replied, "It is Babylon, it is Babylon, and it must fall. The people in the doors and windows are the inhabitants thereof, who scorn and despise the saints of God because of their humility. I soon awoke, clapping my hands together for joy. History of Joseph Smith, by Lucy Smith, page 48-50. After the gospel of Jesus Christ had been restored to the earth, many of the saints and missionaries received dreams which instructed them and prepared them for certain events, which would transpire in their lives. An elder, Charles E. Robinson, had a dream about his own death while in the mission field in South Carolina. Charlie's mission. About 2 months prior to his death, Brother Robinson had a dream in which his uncle, Counselor D.H. Wells, appeared to him and said, addressing him familiarly by name, "Charlie, you must hurry up. You have only half an hour left." He afterwards related it to the elders with whom he was associated at a conference held in July, a little over a month before he died. Some of them supposed at the time that it indicated their being driven out of the state, but Brother Robinson, himself, as soon as he was taken sick, accepted it as a premonition of his end. He never expressed any hope afterwards of living, except to remark that nothing but the power of God could save him. The following account is also given of another dream, from which an inference may be drawn as to the labor in which Brother Robinson is now engaged, and the reason why his presence was required in another sphere. Mrs. Mary Gordon, a member of the church, living at Kings Mountain, the place where Elder Robinson died, a month afterwards had a dream in which her father, whose name was Harkness, and who died soon after the Civil War in which he took part, came to her and said that Brother Robinson, then dead, had been to see him, and convinced him of the truth of the gospel. He further declared that his daughter, Mrs. Gordon, had embraced the true church, and that he depended upon her for his temple work to be done, as his son, who then lived in Colorado, had apostatized, after joining the church and emigrating to that state. Mrs. Gordon afterwards learned, although her dream was the first intimation she had had of it, that such was really the case, that her brother had fallen away from the faith. Numerous instances could be related in which the latter-day saint elders laboring as missionaries in various lands have been warned by dreams of dangers they were about to meet with, and shown how they could escape from them. We have been assured by some elders that they have been shown in dreams beforehand nearly every circumstance of importance that has occurred in their missionary experience. Mill, Star 45-825. Seen in a dream. Dreams have often been the means by which the Holy Spirit has prepared people to receive the message of the restored gospel. Elder C.V. Spencer found that a dream had prepared the way for his missionary labors as he went to preach in Colchester, England. "I came in sight of the place on the top of a long hill and noticed a woman crossing the road with 2 pails. She filled them with water and started back. But as she saw me walking towards her, she dropped both pails and came to me, saying backquote, 'I knew you would come. I saw you in a dream. Come into my house. I have a room all fixed nice and clean for you.' Here I baptized my first fruits of the gospel and accomplished a good work." Gifts of the Spirit, by Duane Crowther, page 195. Apostle Orson Pratt noted the spiritual manifestations which brought many Lamanite people into the church. Lamanite dreams. Now, after so long a period has elapsed since God brought forth this wonderful sign, He has begun to work among the remnants of the house of Israel, the American Indians, upon this continent, by His own power. What is it that has stirred them up to believe in this work? Has it been your exertion? Not altogether. Yet, no doubt, you, in some small degree, as far as your faith would permit, have helped on the work among these wild tribes. Your hearts have been almost discouraged so far as your own labors were concerned. But how soon and how marvelously, when the time had come, has the Lord our God begun to operate upon them as nations and as tribes, bringing them in from hundreds of miles distant to inquire after the elders of this church. What for? What do they want with the elders? They want to be baptized. Who told them to come and be baptized? They say that men came to them in their dreams, and spoke to them in their own language, and told them that away yonder was a people who had authority from God to baptize them, but that they must repent of their sins, cease their evil habits, and lay aside the traditions of their fathers, for they were false, that they must cease to roam over the face of the land, robbing and plundering, and learn to live as the white people. Orson Pratt, J.D. 1819. When God chooses to instruct people and direct their lives, it behooves them to be obedient. At one time Brigham Young was troubled about the great variety of people who comprised the Mormon faith. Subsequently, he received the following dream. Joseph's strange sheep. Several supposed that they would be able to so sanctify themselves, that in 1 year they could take Great Salt Lake Valley and the regions round about up to Enoch, or have him come here. I did not so view the matter, and did not give any special instructions upon it. At that time I dreamed that while I was a little below the road and just north of the hot springs, about 4 miles from here, I saw brother Joseph coming and walked up to the road to see him, and asked him where he was going. He replied, "I am going north." There were 2 or 3 horsemen along, and some men were riding with him upon a few boards placed loosely upon the running gears of a wagon, upon which were also a tent and camp utensils. I wished to talk with him, but he did not seem inclined to conversation, and it occurred to me that he was going to Captain James Brown's to buy all his goats. I had been promised 10 or a dozen of them, but I thought that he was going to buy every one, and that I should not get a single goat to put with my sheep, and I laughed in my sleep. Pretty soon he came back, with a large flock of sheep and goats following the wagon, and as I looked upon them, I saw some sheep that were white, pure, and clean, and as large as a 2-year-old cow, with wool from 10 to 20 inches in length, as fine as silk, and as white as the driven snow. With them were all lesser sizes down to the smallest goat or sheep I ever saw, and all mixed up together. I saw some sheep with hair like that of goats, and goats of all colors, red, black, white, etc., mixed with the sheep, and their sizes, colors, and quality of fleeces seemed to be almost innumerable. I remarked to Joseph that he had got the strangest flock I ever saw, and looked at him slyly and laughed, and asked him what he was going to do with them. He looked at me in his usual shrewd manner and replied, "They are all good in their places." On awaking I at once understood the dream, and I then said, "Go to California, or where you please, for goats are as good in their places as sheep, until the time for them to mingle is over. And in striving to guide and improve the flock, we sometimes have to cry out, 'Shoo,' and at other times to draw them nigh by calling, 'Sheep, sheep.' We are trying to train the flock, and to turn the goats into sheep, and the spotted, ring-streaked, and speckled into beautiful white. And how shall we succeed? Perhaps we shall see rather a curious flock at last, but we will do the best we can." Brigham Young, J.D. 321-22. Elder James W. LeSueur explained how the way was opened to him to preach the gospel. The drifting boat, having been transferred from Yorkshire to the Isles of the English Channel in May 1899, I labored alone about 2 months, and during that time, as well as before and after that, my way was opened by the Lord, so that I could act as his instrument in getting the gospel before a number of souls. One instance I will relate. Having finished tracting St. Sampson's Parish, Guernsey Isle, I was intending to visit some investigators there on the 10th of January, 1900. While on the road, I was impressed to go into a certain house just past. Not knowing why, I kept going on. Again the impression came, this time, with double force. Turning about I walked back, knocked on the door and was invited inside. Sitting down, I conversed on general topics with an intelligent woman. Suddenly a thought came forcibly to her mind, and she exclaimed, "What an odd dream I had the other day! It might have been a vision, for I am quite sure I was awake." Picture of woman in a boat. A woman was converted to the church by a dream showing her on a rudderless, oarless boat, tossed and drifting in the sea of doubt and confusion of false religions. Then she related the following. "I thought I saw myself out in the sea in an oarless, rudderless boat. The waves were dashing against the little boat, nearly capsizing it at every splash. I was in such horror. Sometimes there seemed stones before me, but reaching for them, I found they were merely feathers and straw. After being tossed about nearly to desperation, there appeared before me a fine, large steamer, laden with happy and contented people. Those on board were beckoning me to them. But, no, I drifted away, and finally the ship of rescue disappeared from view. 3 times I beheld this dream or vision, and at the close of each, my mother's face came before me for several moments. Each time, she had an anxious look. What it all meant, I do not know, but it has worried me ever since." This was, in substance, the account she gave of her dream or vision. Like a flash, the interpretation thereof was given me, which, as far as I remember, was as follows. "You have acknowledged to me you did not know which was the right faith. You disbelieve in christening, yet belong to a sect that teaches it is essential to salvation. You say you go to a chapel of another creed, and at the same time agree with me that their claims of instant salvation and belief alone doctrines are wrong. Still you attend another faith, yet doubt its authority. To be plain, what could be a better illustration of your condition than that of the rudderless, oarless boat, tossed about upon the waves of life's rough sea? Are you not tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive?" Paul says, "That is the way with all not having apostles and prophets as their instructors and leaders." F. 4. Are you not drifting about in the shallow boat of doubt and confusion, nearly despairing, reaching for the sure rocks of salvation, and catching only straws in the shape of flimsy romantic tales with a hidden meaning. That does not satisfy the cravings of your soul for heavenly light? Madam, you tell me how hard it is to know which is the truth, and that you are about to despair in your search for it. Yet in your life, the good old gospel ship has appeared before you to rescue you from your dangerous condition 3 times. First, in your youth in Abingdon when, you say, many joined the Mormon faith among your friends. Still you drifted upon the stormy sea of life. The elders and saints left your old home, most of them emigrating to America, and then the vessel disappeared for a time. The second time it came before you was 7 or 8 years ago when Elder Sears and his companions preached in the streets and halls of Abingdon, England. You acknowledge that everything he taught seemed according to the Bible. Yet you drifted, and in time the elders again left Abingdon. Now again, having moved to Guernsey, the sea of life is more turbulent than ever. While you are being tossed about, the Lord again causes the gospel ship to come before you, and with cheerfulness, we beckon you to enter the same, and the voyage of life will be completed in a safe vessel, so you can land in due time at the port of heaven, where there is no more death, sorrow, crying, or pain. For the former things have passed away. Your own mother, beyond the veil, is anxious for you to go on board the gospel ship by entering the Church of Christ. The question now is, will you drift again? She acknowledged the interpretation to be correct. I begged her and her husband to give prayerful consideration to the warning, for by living up to what it teaches, it would mean their salvation. This not only opened up the way at their home, where we had a standing invitation, and where there was a whole family interested in the truth, but from them it went to others, and thus the Lord opened the way. Improvement Era 2583. Sarah Levitt, an early saint who lived at the time of the prophet Joseph, was also inspired in her missionary efforts. She was having a little difficulty until she had the following dream. The big fish. We had only been in the church a short time, perhaps 2 months. About this time I had a dream. I dreamed there was a deep hole in the place that looked very black and muddy, but there were lots of fish in the hole, if by any means we could catch them. It was such a filthy-looking place that it would be a job to get near enough to put a hook in, but I thought I would try. So I got a hook and line and bait and went, and after much trouble I got near enough to throw in my hook. There was a shark in the hole that took the bait every time. I saw that it was of no use to try to catch fish until the shark was out of the way, and so I went to fishing for the shark, and I soon caught it. It was a savage-looking creature. Then I could catch fish. I caught many fish which pleased me well. Sarah Levitt Journal, page 10. The shark was a man who finally believed the truth of the gospel. Her work eventually was the means of converting many souls to the restored gospel. W. J. Kohlberg wrote about 2 dreams and a prophecy. Dreams of introduction. While on a Wisconsin train bound for my native Illinois home, anticipating a happy meeting with my parents, brothers and sisters, after a first and lengthy absence, I fell asleep just before reaching the junction where I was to change cars, dreamed of home, and did not awake until the train was near the boundary line of Iowa, and I further away from home than ever. I got off at the first station with the intention of taking a train back, but before doing so, I met a man who was instrumental in leading me to the place where, for the first time, I attended a Mormon meeting. That meeting later resulted in more than I had anticipated my mountain home among the saints. After hearing awful tales about the Mormons and reading for 2.5 years, all that I could find for and against the church, I determined to know things for myself, bade my pleading parents, friends and relatives goodbye, and left my home in tears, with a promise of converting either myself or some of the Mormons. I arrived in Salt Lake City on New Year's morning, 1903, an absolute stranger. The first residence I entered was that of Solomon F. Kimball, at 274 6th Street, where to my surprise, I was greeted and welcomed as one he had seen before. I had never seen Brother Kimball before, and I wondered till he said, "I saw you in a dream 3 days ago." This statement, together with a subsequent prediction of my conversion to Mormonism and my accomplishment of a great work, almost overcame my surprise because of my skepticism concerning Mormon dreams and prophecies, but is further telling me of my past experience in the East, and my reason for coming west turned my surprise into greater wonder. When I expressed myself as thinking Brother Kimball a good mind reader of past and present, and a possible guesser of the future, I was boldly told of the glorious victory that would take place within me by coming faith and evidence. Oh, how I hoped it true. Faith and evidence one way or the other was what I had long been looking for, and now, oh happy thought, to have them come to me. When I remembered the pangs I had endured in Doubting Castle, I not only hoped their coming, but I prayed for them in tears, and looked till both came and conquered unbelief. On a sunny morning, the second day in the beautiful month of May, 1903, faith and evidence led me to the waters of baptism. Later I was confirmed with knowledge and filled with conviction through the gift of the Holy Ghost. Since then, amid storms and sunshine, I have had ecstatic experiences and mountain-high evidence that so-called Mormonism is the restored gospel of Christ. Improvement Era 9573. Elder T. Lafayette Hatch related another dream which was received by a lady in Ireland before she ever saw Elder Hatch and his companion. He says, "After the close of the last Irish conference, Elder Leo J. Neville and I were appointed to labor in the city of Dublin. It was impossible for us to leave Belfast immediately after receiving our appointment, as I was confined to my room through sickness. In the meantime, Elder T. J. Bennett decided that it would be best for us to labor in the town of Lurgan. Accordingly, he asked us if we would be satisfied to have our appointment changed. We replied in the affirmative, and as soon as I had fully recovered, we started for our appointed field of labor. On reaching Lurgan, we walked directly to the opposite end of the town from the station. Before we made any inquiries as to where we could get a place to stay, a shopkeeper on Avenue Road directed us to a place just a few doors away, where, he thought, we could get accommodation. We knocked at the door designated and were greeted by a lady who, on seeing us, showed signs of great astonishment. We made arrangements to stay at her home, provided, however, that we could have the privilege of looking about the town for a more suitable place. After searching diligently, we returned to the home of the above-mentioned lady, fully convinced that that was the place where we were to stay. We then learned that the whole incident of our coming had been shown to the lady in a dream 2 nights before our arrival, or the night previous to the changing of our appointment. She recognized our dress and our features to be the same as those shown to her in the dream, hence the cause of her being startled at our appearance at her door. She had been shown the exact positions we would take on entering the room, and she was even shown the difference which she now actually knows exists in our dispositions. This, together with the fact that we were advised to come directly to her home, is a strong testimony to us that the hand of the Lord is over his servants. This is the same work in which the prophets of old were engaged. This is the work which Jesus Christ set up. This is the same gospel which was preached by Peter and Paul and other apostles. The same Spirit which directed them directs God's servants today, and if we are faithful we will not fail to enjoy the gifts of the Spirit. Mill, Star, 7283. Another elder, by the name of Walter G. Paul, also wrote about his mission. In April 1882, I left my home in Utah for a mission to the eastern and southern states of America. I was then but a young man of 21 and inexperienced in the mission field. On arriving at my destination, Nashville, Tennessee, I was appointed to labor in and around Rochester, Butler Company, Kentucky, to which locality I was sent with a letter of release for Elder John W. Taylor by Elder John Morgan, president of the mission. Elder Taylor spent a week with me before he left. I felt extremely weak and timid, but my companion in his prophetic vein predicted that I would soon be able to explain intelligently the principles of the gospel, and therefore, I was somewhat comforted. I preached my first discourse in a log cabin, 10 by 12 feet, located in a dense wood. There were 10 people present, and I talked 2.5 minutes. This cabin was built by and for the Latter-day Saints, but unfortunately it extended on to the possessions of one who was unfriendly to us, and we were ordered to move it. Nothing was to be done, but to put all hands to the task, and with a long pull and a strong pull, we moved the meeting house a distance of 6 feet off the enemy's ground. We then named the cabin Liberty. One spring morning, not long after this, while I was walking through the woods, I met a gentleman with grip and umbrella. On seeing me he exclaimed, "Hello, Brother Paul. I know you. I dreamed about you last night." We were soon fast friends, as I discovered him to be Elder Lewis A. Kelsch, who had walked 75 miles to meet me. He told me that for months past a Baptist preacher's wife of Grayson County, Kentucky, had been dreaming all about me. She knew my name and could describe me accurately. She says, explained Elder Kelsch, that she will not be satisfied until she sees you. She claims that she will know you even among 1,000. This lady had been told that there was no elder in the mission by my name or answering to the description which she gave. Not only that, but the elders said they knew no one in Utah by my name. Well, the lady had said there is, and I am going to see him. I was therefore told to get ready for the 75 miles walk, which I did. We walked 40 miles the first day, 20 the second, and finished the journey on the third. It made me very footsore and tired. Within a short distance of the Miller house, a halt was made, and a consultation was had as to the best manner of procedure. It was finally decided that we all three should go up to the house, and that I should be introduced by some other name. But Mrs. Miller could not be deceived. She laughed as we greeted her, and she said to me, "How do you do, Brother Paul? I have been dreaming about you for months past." We next went out into the cornfield and endeavored to play the same trick on Mr. Miller, but he had listened to his wife's description of me so often that he recognized me at once. I wanted to accompany the elders on their journeys to fill appointments, but nothing would do, but I must stay with the Millers. The children, there were 15 of them, were dispatched to the neighbors with an invitation to come and see the long-looked-for preacher from Utah. I tried to be sociable, but I was very much embarrassed upon being invited to talk to them. I tried to entertain them on home and other topics, as I could not discuss freely the principles of the gospel. In this providential way I was led to this family. It certainly was not chance. My first mission call was for Great Britain, which was changed to the southern states. Then my appointment was to the exact locality where I had been seen in dreams by this woman. It was not long, however, before another kind of experience awaited us. One of our friends came rushing into the house exclaiming, "Flee for your lives. A mob of 50 armed men are not over half a mile away, and they have taken an oath to drive the Mormon preachers from the county." My companion and I decided to take refuge in the woods, where we asked the Lord in humble prayer for his protection. A friend was raised up for us, and the mob dispersed without doing us any mischief. We came out of our hiding, and as we were going along the road to a nearby town, we passed a number of the mobbers on their way home. They did not molest us. Mill, Star, 68-175. Brigham Young said that he gave these promised blessings upon all the saints, who would be obedient to every requirement of the gospel. How shall we know what to do? By being obedient to every requirement of the gospel. Brother Hooper has stated that I promised him the assistance of the Almighty. I did. I laid my hands upon him and blessed him, and told him that he should have dreams and visions, and power with God to know what to do, if he lived his religion. But if he did not, I promised him nothing. Brigham Young, J.D. 8-148. Lewis Stewart wrote the following account of a most unusual dream. On this occasion the Lord gave instruction in a dream to the parents of a sick child. A bottle of olive oil. Well, it happened several years ago. We lived in Salt Lake City then, but incidents like the one I now relate are never forgotten. The impressions which they make are so vivid they seem to become a part of our being. A friend of mine, my neighbor, asked me to call on him at his home, and bring with me some other elder that we might administer to his child, who then lay sick, it might be dying. This was no uncommon call at that time, and when the evening brought release from toil, a brother, whose heart beat in sympathy with the sick, and with faith in the Lord, had often blessed them with new health, and myself called on our mutual friend. The family lived in the upper part of a large house. To reach them we had to climb some stairs on the outside of the house, leading to the rooms in which they lived. I mention this because, when ascending the stairs, a voice seemed to whisper over my shoulder, "You need not enter there, for death has gone before you." I was a young man, but this was not the first time in my life that I had heard the tempter's voice, and turning, mentally, I mean, rebuked the power that leads men's souls astray. On going into the rooms, however, my heart first throbbed with fear, and then it seemed almost to stop beating, for there I saw, lying on its mother's lap, the little child. Disease had blanched its little cheek, and oh, its eyes were sunken and glazed. Surely that was death. But rousing myself, the thought that duty called me there, and doubts and fears, though common enough, never yet helped mortals to bear their burdens, nor helped to move those burdens from off the shoulders of weary, struggling souls, stirred me to action. We blessed the baby, and the great physician heard our prayers. It seemed to me that even while our hands were on the little head, sickness left and life and health, taking its place, flowed like a fountain through all the little veins, carrying to the limbs strength, and to the features beauty. Before we left the house the little pet, fully restored to health, stretching its little hands toward us, smiling and cooing, expressed its joy in happy baby language. Salt Lake City, that night, contained few happier hearts than those assembled in that little room. Now, it seemed to me, although it is no uncommon thing for the sick to be healed through the laying on of hands, and the blessings of our God, yet every time we see it done, we wonder while we praise, and simple though my story is, the recollection brings forth again the thoughts of wonder and gratitude. But hear the sequel of my tale. Some time after the baby was healed, the father asked me if I remembered the circumstance, and on my assuring him there was little likelihood of my forgetting such an incident, he said, as near as I can recollect, "You know the baby had been sick for some time, and we had doctor's help. We gave it the medicine prescribed, and watched and nursed it day and night. I would tend the baby from evening until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Then, waking my wife from her too short sleep, would lie down to get a nap before going to work. In this way we worked until we were nearly worn out, as you know. One morning I laid down, with my clothes on as I always did, and while sleeping had an interesting dream. The Lord's prescription. The Lord prescribed olive oil for a child's illness, as shown in a dream. The father called for the elders who prayed and administered the olive oil, and the child was healed. I thought that I was going to ZCMI drugstore to get medicine for the baby. I got a bottle, wrapped in white paper and tied with a red string. The way drugstore goods are usually fixed up, and returning home untied the string, and removing the paper found a bottle of what seemed to be olive oil. I awoke and, thanking God for the lesson, asked you brethren to call, with the happy result we witnessed. Lewis Stewart, contributor, 16616. Brigham Young received a dream instructing him to teach the saints to get the Spirit of the Lord, and to keep it. George Lobb records this incident in his journal. A Dream of Joseph. Conference April 6, 1847, at Winter Quarters. B. Young was teaching the people to get the Spirit of the Lord, and to keep the Spirit of the Lord, for he had seen Joseph in a dream, and he told him to tell this people to get the Spirit and to keep it, and that he told him again and again, and to try all spirits that they may know good spirits from evil ones, and not to bar their hearts against any, but cleave to the good, for this is the way to try the different spirits. Journal of George Lobb. George Q. Cannon was instructed in a dream about the power of prayer and faith. Raising the anchor. There were 10 of us, of whom I was the youngest, windbound in the Bay of San Francisco, and we had been thus delayed for nearly a week near the Golden Gate, in consequence of headwinds. I dreamed one night that this party of brethren were heaving at the windlass, having a rope attached to it reaching forward to the anchor at the bow of the vessel. We were working with all our might endeavoring to raise the anchor, but seemingly we made but little progress. While thus engaged I thought the prophet Joseph came from the after part of the vessel dressed in his temple clothes, and tapping me on the shoulder told me to go with him. I went, and he climbed on to the forecastle, which was higher than the main deck and on a level with the bulwarks, and there he knelt down, also telling me to kneel down with him. He prayed according to the order of prayer which is revealed. After prayer, he arose upon his feet. Now said he, George, take hold of that rope, the rope we had been pulling on with all our might. I took hold of it, and with the greatest ease and without the least effort the anchor was raised. Now said he, let this be a lesson to you. Remember that great things can be accomplished through the power of prayer, and the exercise of faith in the right way. George Q. Cannon, J.D. 22-289. Another dream of instruction was given beautifully portraying the value and example of prayer. The Angel's Tablet of Prayers. I was recovering from a severe illness of many weeks, and was well enough to sit at an open window in my easy chair, and as our house stood in a pleasant garden in the suburbs of London, the first roses of the year scented the soft breeze that fanned my pale cheeks, and revived my languid frame. The bells of the parish church were just beginning their chimes, and the familiar sound awakened in me an intense longing to be with my family once more, a worshipper in the house of God. I took up my Bible and prayer book, which had been placed on the table beside me, intending to read when the hour of 11 o'clock service should be announced by the ceasing of the bells, and in the meantime closed my eyes, and soothed my impatient wishes by picturing to myself the shady avenue of blossoming limes that led to the church, and the throngs that would now be entering it for the public worship of the day. All at once I seemed to be walking in the beautiful churchyard, yet prevented from gratifying my eager wish to enter the church by some irresistible though unseen hand. One by one the congregation, in their gay Sunday dresses, passed me by, and went in, where I vainly strove to follow. The parish children, in 2 long and orderly trains, defiled up the stairs into the galleries, and except a few stragglers, hurrying in, as feeling themselves late, I was left alone. Suddenly I was conscious of some awful presence, and felt myself addressed by a voice of sweet solemnity in words to this effect: Mortal, who, by divine mercy, hast been permitted to return from the gates of the grave, pause before thou enterest God's holy house again. Reflect how often thou hast profaned his solemn public worship by irreverence, or by inattention, which in his sight is irreverence. Consider well the great privilege, the unspeakable benefit and blessing of united prayer, lest by again abusing it, thou tire the patience of thy long-suffering God, and tempt him forever to deprive thee of that which hitherto thou hast so little valued. Seeing that I cast down my eyes with a flush of conscious guilt, The gracious being continued in a milder tone. I am one of the angels commissioned to gather the prayers of the saints, and form them into odorous incense, that they may rise to the throne of God. Enter now with me, and thou shalt for thy warning be enabled to discern those among the devotions about to be offered which are acceptable to him, and to see how few in number, how weak and how unworthy they are. As he ceased speaking, I found myself by the side of the angel still, but within the church, and so placed that I could distinctly see every part of the building. Observe, said the angel, that those prayers that come from the heart, and which alone ascend on high, will seem to be uttered aloud. They will be more or less audible in proportion to their earnestness when the thoughts wander. The sounds will grow faint and even cease altogether. This explained to me why the organist, though apparently playing with great energy, produced no sound, and why, when the service began, though the lips of many moved and appeared attentive, only a few faint murmurings were heard. How strange and awful it was to note the sort of death-like silence that prevailed in whole pews, in which, it was thus evident no heart was raised in gratitude to heaven. Even in the Te Deum and Jubilate, the voices sometimes sunk in total silence. After the creed, there was a low murmuring of the verticals, and then, distinct and clear above all other sounds, a sweet childish voice softly and reverently repeated the Lord's Prayer. I turned in the direction of the sound, and distinguished it among one of the children of the poor people, a very little boy. His hands were clasped together as he knelt, his eyes were closed, his gentle face compassed in reverence, and as the angel wrote on his tablets the words that fell from those young lips, his smile, like a sunbeam, illuminated the church for a moment, and I remembered the words of David, where he says, "Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise." Presently I was again reminded of the prayer of the publican in Holy Writ. A wretched-looking man, who swept the crossings near the church, lounged into the center aisle during the reading of the lesson, his occupation being for the hour suspended. The second lesson was the 24th chapter of St. Matthew. Some verses attracted his attention. He listened with more and more seriousness, until at length he put his hand over his face and exclaimed aloud, "What will become of me at the day of judgment? Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner." That prayer was inserted in the tablets of the angel. Oh, may it not stand alone, but be an awakening of better things. May God indeed have mercy on the poor, neglected ones, and raise up someone to teach them and care for their immortal souls. After this, I grew accustomed to the broken murmur and interrupted sounds and followed many a humble Christian through a portion of the litany, though often while I was listening with hopeful attention, a sudden and total pause showed, but too plainly the thoughts of the kneeling supplicant had wandered far away, and that those who had appeared so earnest in their devotions had become languid and silent like the rest of the congregation. "Thou art shocked at what thou hast observed," said the angel. "I will show thee greater abominations than these. God is strong and patient. He is provoked every day. Listen, now, and thou shalt hear the thoughts of all these people. So shalt thou have some faint idea of the forbearance God continually exercises towards those who draw near to him with their lips, while their hearts are far from him." As the angel spoke, my ears were deafened by a clamor which would have been shocking in a humble meeting, but which here, in God's holy house, was awfully profane. The countenance remained compassed and serious as before, the lips moved with the words of prayer, but the phrases they uttered were of the world and its occupations. "How shamefully late Mrs. Alack always comes," said one woman, who, looking over the edge of her prayer book, saw her neighbor and a train of daughters bustle into the next pew. "What an example to set her family! Thank goodness no one can accuse me of that sin. New bonnets again already," exclaimed the last comer, returning the neighborly glance from the other seat, ere she compassed herself to the semblance of devotion. "How can they afford it? Heaven only knows, and their father owing all his Christmas bills yet. If my girls look shabby, we at least pay our debts. Oh, there's Tom S." Nodded a young man to his friend in the opposite gallery. "He is growing quite religious and respectable, I declare. He has been at church 2 Sundays running. How much longer will the devout fit last?" These were shocking and striking examples of irreverence. There were, happily, not many such. The involuntary wanderings of thought were more common. As the service proceeded, the attention of the congregation flagged more, and more the hubbub of worldly talk increased. One man compassed a letter he intended to send, and even altered whole passages, and rounded elegant periods without one check or recollection of the holy place where he stood. Another repeated a long dialogue which had passed between himself and a friend the night before, and considered how he might have spoken more to the purpose. Some young girls rehearsed scenes with their lovers, some recalled the incidents of their last ball. Careful housewives planned schemes of economy. gave warning to their servants, arranged the turning of a dress, or decided on the most becoming trimming of a bonnet. To me, conscious of the recording angel's presence, all this solemn mockery of worship was frightful. I would have given worlds to rouse this congregation to a sense of what they were doing, and to my comfort, I saw that for the involuntary offense, a gentle warning was provided, as the angel was about to quit a place so desecrated. His frown of disapproval threw an influence over these thoughtless ones, and recalled the wandering thoughts of many a soul, unconscious whence came the breath that revived the dying flame of their devotions. Then self-blame and remorse of which those kneeling nearest knew nothing, wrung the heart, shocked at its own careless ingratitude, wondering at the forbearance of the Almighty, while more devotional thoughts, and I trust more fervent prayer, succeeded to the momentary forgetfulness. In spite of all these helps, the amount of real devotion was small, and when I looked at the angel's tablets, I was shocked to see how little was recorded therein. Out of 300 Christians, thought I, assembled after a week of mercies, to praise and bless the giver of all good, are these few words the sum of what they offer? Look to thyself, said the angel, reading my thoughts. Such as these are, such hast thou long been. Darest thou, after what has been revealed to thee, act such a part again? Oh, could thy immortal ears bear to listen to the songs of the rejoicing angels, before the throne of the Almighty? Thou wouldst indeed wonder at the condescending mercy which stoops to accept these few faint wandering notes of prayer and praise. Yet the sinless angels veil their faces before him in whose presence man stands boldly up, with such mockery of worship, as thou hast seen this day. Remember the solemn warning, lest hereafter it be counted to thee as an aggravation of guilt. Suddenly the sweet solemn voice ceased, the glorious angel disappeared, and so oppressive seemed the silence and loneliness that I started and awoke. My watch pointed to the hour of 11. It must have been the stopping of the bells that interrupted my slumbers, and all the solemn scene had passed before my mind in the short space of a few minutes. May the lessons I learned in those few minutes never be effaced from my heart, and if this account of them should recall one wandering thought in the house of prayer, or teach any to value more highly, and cultivate more carefully the privilege of joining in the public worship of our God and Father, it will not have been written in vain. Contributor 6-141. The principles of the laws of health were clearly portrayed in a dream to another Latter-day Saint. He wrote, "The word of wisdom. Dear sir, permit me to trouble you with a dream of mine, which, if worthy of a place in your paper, is at your disposal. A few evenings ago, I was reading the news when my eye rested on the word of wisdom, together with your remarks, etc. to the saints. You must know, I have been one of the best customers to the storekeepers for tea, coffee, etc., and I could not help thinking what I should do in this matter, and asked myself why it should come out at this particular time. I went to bed still deeply impressed with the question, not being able to solve it, when sleep came over me, and I dreamed that I was taken to a high hill, where I could see the nations of the earth before me. I beheld a great commotion, the people mourning and crying, and all seemed in great distress. I looked round and beheld a man standing by my side. I asked him why this distress amongst the people. He answered that the destroying angel was abroad in the shape of the cholera, that he was taking his thousands from the people, and but few could escape. I inquired if the saints would be taken. He said, look, and I looked and beheld the mountains of Deseret, with their snow-capped tops. I beheld the valleys covered with grain, and the lowing of the cattle, and the bleating of the sheep on the hills, was music to my ear. I beheld that health and prosperity dwelt in their midst, and I rejoiced and gave thanks to God, that his people were protected from the destroyer. My companion asked me to go down with him to the city where the saints dwelt. I did so, and entered their habitations. They were clean, and I beheld that every man, woman and child wore homespun clothes. The sound of the weaver's shuttle, the women's spinning wheel, and the song of the maiden while at work, was melody equal to the harp of David, when he dispelled the evil spirit out of Saul. Their gardens round their houses were like paradise, and the morning glory grew in loveliness round their windows. Peace and prosperity dwelt in every habitation, and wisdom flowed from their lips. The children looked healthy, and their eagle eyes and noble foreheads showed that there was a race springing up like unto the firstborn sons of Adam. In our meanderings through the city we chanced to go into one house, where there were many people gathered together. I asked the reason, when I was told that it was a party of strangers who were going to the old mines, together with some of the brethren. I beheld that the table was covered with all the luxuries of life. The bell rang when all sat down. I saw that the tea and coffee were very profuse, but the saints drank cold water. I was astonished at it and was about to ask my companion why they abstained from the tea and coffee, when he pointed to one end of the table, where I beheld a man drop down on the floor. The cry of the cholera was immediately heard throughout the room. Soon after, I heard another cry, and then another, and I beheld that the destroyer was doing his work. We drew nigh to the table where they had sat. I was struck dumb when my companion pointed to the tea and coffee cups, opposite where these men had sat, and he said, "Your question is answered. Why, the presidency has put forth the word of wisdom, and if the saints will keep the laws of God, and obey his word of wisdom, they shall receive health in their navel and marrow to their bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not be faint. And the destroying angel shall pass by them as the children of Israel, and not slay them." Amen. With this I awoke, and I have had no more trouble about tea, coffee, tobacco, etc., hoping that the brethren who keep large parties will profit by this dream, and show an example by having their tables beautifully ornamented with tumblers, and the clear spring water sparkling in them, which invites us to drink of the waters of health freely, and by that means wisdom may flow from the lips of all the saints, and that our children will rise up and call us blessed. I subscribe myself respectfully yours, Homer. Deseret News, January 25, 1851. By simple means the Lord is able to bring about his wonders among men. As men prepare their hearts for the instructions of God, he then can write upon them. Thus the weak and humble of the world can accomplish mighty and powerful things. It is when we ask that we shall be given, and when we knock that it will be opened to us. Saved by a dream. Elias Howe, inventor of the sewing machine, spent every cent he owned and could borrow trying to perfect a working model. But always one problem thwarted him: where to put the eye in the needle so the machine would stitch. Placing it at the heel, as with the ordinary sewing needle, didn't work. After long months of experimenting, the discouraged and fundless young Howe was on the verge of abandoning the whole project, when he was saved by a dream. In the dream, he was prisoner of a savage king in a strange country, and, as his waking problem was the perfection of a sewing machine, so it was in the dream. Savages danced about, chanting as he sweated at his task. The king advanced to the beat of tom-toms, and gave Howe 24 hours to finish the machine. Either that, or he would go to make a cannibal dinner. The hours spun past, yet the machine would not sew for lack of a proper needle. Howe finally had to give up, but as he was being led to the place of execution, he noticed the warriors' spears were pierced near the point. Frantically he pleaded for more time. Now he knew how to make his machine sew. As the savage king paid no attention, he raised his voice louder and woke up yelling. It was 3 a.m. Still trembling but wide awake, Elias Howe hurried to his workroom. When the sun rose, he had finished the first model of a needle with the eye near the point. At last, the sewing machine worked. Mary Alca's Coronet, November 1949.